at the time, but it brought the new laws so that there's a stumbling block to your freedom everywhere you go along the line. Also last year, The Belarus Secret came out by John Loftus, and I talked about it at length. That is one of the best books of the year, along with Trading with the Enemy by Charles Hyam. And in there he talks about Frank Wiesner of the OSS, who was director of the Office of Policy Coordination, who brought in the Nazis from the Iron Guard and the Romanians and so forth. And I learned just this year that Mr. Liebler, Wesley Liebler, who was an attorney for the Warren Commission, worked in the law office of Frank Wiesner in New York City, and Liebler was in charge of the testimony of the White Russian czarists, the friends of Lee and Marina Oswald in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. That was his expertise, and he came out of the law office of Frank Wiesner. I think Peter Dale Scott has this book in his book on the Kennedy assassination. And he also tells in the book how General Patton was sheltering a large number of the SS members with him. That was also Fritz Kramer was on that staff, and Otto Skorzeny and their special units that were to be used later. Now, there's more on these Nazis that assembled together that came out in the London Times this last week and also yesterday, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But a year ago, these items were in the news, how the special forces I talked about was formed by Hitler's agents, Dr. Franz Alfred Sieks, and how our Green Berets and our Mr. Beckwith got their muscles from Hitler's Nazis and from Otto Skorzeny, who formed those special forces. And now they want to come in quotes, to save us. They will create the situation, then they'll come in and save us. The excuse for killing the terrorists on spot, Beckwith said this week, has to do with, look at what happened at the Munich Olympic Games in 1972 with the hooded Palestinian terrorists and the 11 Israeli Olympic athletes that were killed. Well, it's been a few years since 1972, 11 years, and everyone involved with their George Habash from Lebanon, with his links to Larry McDonald, the CIA, the links to Richard Nixon. The CIA was heavily involved with the Nazis and the Palestinians that created the crisis. And he says in his article that since that horror, we've watched and worried about the Olympics coming to Los Angeles. And he tells how in Munich, the Germans couldn't act. They could see the counter-terrorists through their scope, but they didn't shoot them. They had their sights ready, but they lacked the resolve, and they didn't fire. And you could watch on television for the first time this hostage rescue team, this wonderful phenomena. Well, that was duplicated 2 years later by the Los Angeles Police Department and the SWAT team. If you like to see that kind of action, then follow it up, because what you get is the first story, and what follows later is the actual terrible story of how the CIA and the Nazis, Otto Skorzeny and Hitler's Nazis in Palestine and in Atlanta, Georgia, and in Washington, set up the controversy, then have the excuse to save you from the problem.